Welcome to Channel Unveiling Mysteries. In a world where the most absurd things are taken for granted, some characters step out of the shadows not to spread fear, but to teach an entire legal system a lesson about the value of cash. Zhao Xianwei is the living embodiment of the immortal adage, "Money can buy gods, let alone a reduced sentence." It is often said that the law is fair and justice is blind. But it seems that in 1990s China, justice was not only not blind, but also missing an eye, thanks to the steadfast presence of people like Zhao Xianwei, a death row inmate who lived like an emperor, died late like a VIP, and most notably, could run an entire criminal enterprise from behind bars with just a landline telephone. Where to begin to talk about a man who never knew the concept of sitting still for the law? Perhaps we must return to where it all began. Jinzhou, a small city with great greed. Zhao Xianwei was born into a family that was not too poor, nor did they have the money to buy morality. From a young age, he showed outstanding potential in the field of disturbing village order. His childhood games were not flying kites, jumping rope, or playing tag, but robbing classmates, fighting in class, and borrowing money from teachers without repaying it. He dropped out in the 4th grade, not because he was too stupid, but because he believed that school taught morality while life taught money. And indeed, he learned very quickly. Just a few years later, he was the most prominent figure in the unlicensed juvenile crime world. From the ages of 14 to 16, Zhao was a familiar face at the police station, and on his 16th birthday, he decided to celebrate by stabbing someone, causing serious injury. He was immediately awarded a 2-year prison sentence, just enough to complete an advanced program in juvenile delinquency. In prison, he did not reform, but rather innovated, learning from the older, more experienced inmates. He was released from prison not only with a sharper knife, but also with a more organized mind. To make it big, you need followers. To have followers, you need territory. To have territory, you need to punch fast and bribe well. After graduating from the Personality Reform Academy with a degree in dangerous behavior honors, Zhao began the great enterprise of his life, opening a nightclub, which he called an entertainment paradise, while his victims called it a toll-collecting hell. His nightclub had the beautiful name Step into Paradise, sounding like a 5-star resort, but it was actually a place for annual brawls, periodic stabbings, and weekly protection rackets. Within just 2 years, Zhao became an underground force in the Dalian Economic Development Zone. He not only ran the nightclub, but was also behind more complex activities, loan sharking, bribing local police, and especially organizing physical exchanges with rival gangs using clubs, knives, and even homemade guns. Naturally, a person like that could not avoid major conflicts. And the biggest clash was with the boss Chao Fusong, who, if he were alive today, would surely sue Zhao for using him without prior notice. A major brawl broke out, ending with Song's death and Zhao's official nationwide debut. Fleeing like in an action movie, he escaped abroad, changed his name, and literally went underground. But a year later, either missing the taste of his hometown cuisine or simply thinking justice had fallen asleep, he secretly returned to Dalian. Unfortunately for him, the local police had a very good memory, and he was immediately arrested. The trial was swift. He was sentenced to death and stripped of all political rights. But who would have thought this was just the beginning of the most golden period in his career as a multi-talented prisoner? After receiving the death sentence, a normal person would despair, break down, or write letters of repentance to their relatives. But for Zhao Xianwei, the death penalty was merely a debt to be negotiated. He didn't see the court as a place to execute justice, but as a service shop where, if you paid the right price, everything could be renegotiated. Immediately after the verdict, a secret network was activated. His loyal underlings outside began a campaign to rescue their boss with cash. They bribed, lobbied, and sought to exploit every loophole in the judicial system. And then, like a magic spell that knew how to count bank account numbers, Zhao Xianwei's death sentence was suspended for cooperating with the investigation. But he didn't just cooperate. He turned cooperation into a long-term investment partnership, providing false information and denouncing accomplices, as long as the accomplices were also fake. With every word he spoke, he bought a few more months of life. And in those months, he continued to expand his influence, not in the criminal underworld, but in the correctional industry. From the Dalian prison hospital, where he was temporarily treated for tuberculosis, a disease often chosen by prisoners to avoid inspections, Zhao began to build his own facilities. And the facilities here were not for the prison, but for himself. A private apartment equipped like a Korean drama, with wooden floors, a mattress bed, a color TV, a VCD player with a select collection of psychological films, a sofa, a refrigerator, and air conditioning. The only thing missing was a land ownership certificate, but the most astonishing thing was that he had his own private landline to communicate with the outside world. And it wasn't to call his mother. He used it to direct his subordinates on the outside, sign business contracts, and even quote prices for outsourced sentence reduction services. If you were a prisoner with money, you went to Zhao Xianwei, and he would prepare a dreamlike rehabilitation file for you. And love, oh my. If a death row inmate could have a more passionate love affair than an ordinary office worker, then the law didn't just have loopholes, it had a sunroof. A married female guard fell into Zhao's net of love. Perhaps she was won over by the sweet words of a man who possessed both a gangster's charisma and a 21-inch TV in his room. They spent nights together secretly, defying prison regulations, the eyes and ears of colleagues, and even the sounds echoing from the room each night that made even the pretending guards blush and bow their heads. He lived like a king, ruling the other prisoners with a glance. Anyone who dared to disobey was dealt with internally. The other guards dared not say a word. The prison warden received a monthly envelope. Sometimes he even sought Zhao's advice on how to manage personnel in an environment lacking sunlight. Your rehabilitation record didn't matter. You once beat up a cellmate over a sleeping spot? No problem. You just needed money. Zhao and his underground accounting team would prepare a file for you, describing heroic acts like saving a fellow inmate from an imaginary fire, exposing a dream world smuggling ring, or setting a record for the fastest paper crane folding in rehabilitation group number 2. Each file came with a price: 5,000 yuan for a cheap one, or a whole apartment for an expensive one. Of course, a 3-year reduction didn't come with a VAT invoice, but it did come with a presumed moral warranty. When the Dalian prison was tasked with production reform under a financial self-sufficiency model, Zhao was appointed chairman of the Labor and Economic Reform Committee. That is, a death row inmate still held a management title. He opened workshops, hired inmates, produced small handicrafts, and at the same time, laundered money by recording the price of raw materials at 4 times their actual cost. One day, he gave the prison warden, Xie Hongjun, 100,000 yen in cash and whispered in his ear, "I still have investment projects out there, as long as you give me 2 more years to breathe." And so a proposal for an unexpected sentence reduction was drafted again. This time, the reason was that Zhao Xianwei had bravely rushed to save people in a workshop fire. The truth was, during that fire, Zhao was sitting drinking tea, watching TV, and asking the female guard Do you prefer the red of the fire or the blue of love? After a series of world-class, third-world-level prison reform miracles, Zhao Xianwei grew tired of living in his gilded cage with curtains. Although he enjoyed all the privileges, eating separately, sleeping separately, loving separately, making phone calls separately, and even scheduling meetings with business partners from outside society right from his cell, for him it was all just a temporary solution. What he truly craved was not a leather-wrapped sofa or a new 32-inch TV, but absolute freedom to continue his trade of stabbing, slashing, making money, and bribing without limits. And so, he launched a new plan: feign insanity to be granted medical parole. The planned madness program began with him punching fellow inmates without reason, shouting, "I am the Son of Heaven." Then he stood in the middle of the prison yard, shirtless, singing the national anthem, and then bit his own arm to prove he was testing the elasticity of human skin. The medical staff began to get confused. One said he was really crazy. Another sighed, no, his acting is better than the lead actor on the Central Television channel. To ensure the plan's success, Zhao continued to coordinate with relevant parties. A medical file was secretly altered. He swapped his brain CT scan results with the file of a brain tumor patient from a provincial hospital. Then, a forensic medical examination report was sent to the prison management. Zhao Xianwei suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder from a head injury and cannot continue serving his sentence without specialized treatment at an external facility. Xie Hongjun, the prison warden, who was accustomed to money that smelled of perfume, agreed immediately without checking for any wound. Together with his deputies, they prepared a file to send to the provincial reformatory, urgently requesting the death row inmate be allowed out for treatment because humanity is the #1 priority. After having received enough reason in a brown envelope, the following month, Zhao officially walked out of the prison gates, without handcuffs, without a police escort. He left like a businessman on a trip, wearing a woolen hat, carrying a briefcase and whistling. And just half a month later, he committed a new crime. During a dispute at a sauna center, Zhao pulled out a hunting rifle and sent one person straight to heaven, seriously injuring another. The cause started from an argument over a seat in the steam room. But for Zhao, it was an opportunity to show off the gangster charisma that had rusted after 2 years of living too peacefully. Knowing he had caused a ministerial-level shockwave, he immediately disappeared from the map, changed his name and face, and fled to the rural outskirts, living in hiding under the guise of a retired electrician from Beijing. But this time, luck was no longer on his side. China was then in the midst of a campaign to clean up its judicial system. People and their families were being scrutinized, from household registration to electricity bills. Zhao was on the red list, like a traffic light signaling that the magic was about to run out. The police traced his every relationship, followed every illicit transaction, and finally captured Zhao Xianwei and his entire gang's management board. This time, there was no private room, no air conditioning, no female guard whispering "Brother Zhao" in a soft moan. He was taken to Shenyang, where he had no connections, no power, and no moral warranty. Here, he collapsed faster than a real estate bubble. After many hours of continuous interrogation, with no lobster rice, no high-class tea, just cold water and a white light shining on his face, he broke down and confessed everything. He detailed every bribe, every bonus, every rehabilitation negotiation with Warden Xie Hongjun and Deputy Warden Yang Fuyu. His testimony shook the entire Dalian judicial system. Many middle and high-ranking officials were arrested. Some had even accepted bribes from him 5 times before bothering to check his mental illness certificate. When Zhao Xianwei's confession was fully recorded, the investigators didn't need to find a script because his life was already a complete movie, enough to be shown in theaters for 2 consecutive weeks without cutting a single scene. A death row inmate living in a private room, making business calls, dating a guard, coming and going like a chairman of the board, and then faking madness to get out and continue committing crimes. All these things had previously only existed in anti-establishment films. But for Zhao, it was a corporate-style survival plan. In 2003, the Shenyang court sentenced Zhao Xianwei to death for the last time. This time, there was no delay, no postponement, no acting. The sentence was carried out immediately. And for him, life ended not in pain, but in bewilderment. Because until the very last moment, he still didn't understand why he couldn't get away this time. Perhaps it was because the system had finally learned to feel shame. After his death came a major reshuffle in the judicial and prison management sectors. Xie Hongjun, once known as the death row inmate's trusted confidant, was sentenced to 15 years in prison, had his assets confiscated, was expelled from the party, and notably, was banned from contact with cash for life to avoid itchy hands. Deputy Warden Yang Fuyu was sentenced to 13 years, 2 of which were for not reacting when he heard inappropriate sounds coming from cell number 2. A host of guards, forensic doctors, file clerks, and even the driver who took Zhao for medical checkups were also summoned and tried. One of them confessed, "I thought he was really pardoned because he lived better than I did." The press exploded. Front pages simultaneously published the case with headlines that couldn't be more shocking. Death row inmate runs business from prison. Who aided him? Prison warden accepts house, accepts money, accepts guilt. From solitary confinement to love chamber, the resume of Zhao Xianwei. The public was bewildered, then outraged, then fell silent. Because everyone understood that Zhao was just the flag planted on the tip of a submerged iceberg. How many other Zhao Xianweis were yet to be exposed? How many other prisons had resort rooms for elite inmates? How many sentences were being rewritten by the soft keyboard of an envelope? No one answered these questions, because when the answer is too obvious, people are afraid to ask more. So, what did Zhao Xianwei leave behind? A ruined career? No. A proud legacy? No. He left behind a slap in the face to the entire legal system that was supposed to be impartial. He lived like a king in prison, and that was not his fault alone, but the fault of an entire mechanism that allowed power and money to stand above morality. He did not destroy the law, he just used it effectively. If society is a playground, then the law is the fence that sets the limits. But when that fence can be bought for the price of an envelope, people like Zhao Xianwei will turn the playground into an arena where whoever holds the money holds the law. He was not a hero, but his story is one of the most tragic comedies in modern Chinese criminal history. A dark comedy where the death row inmate lives like a king, while decent people sit at home reading the newspaper, seething with anger. Don't forget to subscribe to the Unveiling Mysteries channel to always receive the latest videos that help you achieve success in life. Thank you for following and accompanying the channel.